And we are back, and we're starting off our first conversation this morning with a panel of professional counselors who are within our school system, and of course the coordinator from the Ministry of Education. We have with us Collin Estrada, who is the president of the Belize School Counselor Association and the coordinator of the School Counseling and Care Unit. We have Caryl Brannon, who is the secretary of the association, and she is the counselor for the government primary schools in the Belize district. We have Christina Escalante, who's the treasurer of the association and the counselor at Pallotti High School, and Guadalupe Novelo Gillett, who is the counselor at Sacred Heart Junior College. Good morning and welcome. Good morning. So I think that a lot of people are probably unaware that there is an association of school counselors. So I want to start there, talking about when it was identified as a need and actually formulated.
We have been at this for the past 6 years, okay, officially. In 2012, there was a group that came together, and from then we have been working in terms of meeting the needs of the school counselors. And one of the things that has happened in terms of meeting the needs of school counselors is that there has been a change in terms of even the continuous professional development during the summer, whereby the counselors get specific training that is related to their field. It used to be whereby we would just attend all the other sessions and workshops, but since 2012 we have decided that we need to do that for ourselves, and we've had collaboration from the Ministry of Education. We've had international partners that have come in to help us in terms of training, you know, and then apart from that, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with ATLIB so that they also help us in terms of training for our counselors, because it is necessary.
Yeah.
A very basic question here, just to establish its importance. Why is there a need for counseling at the primary and secondary school levels?
I will start off with the primary, whereby one of the simplest things that we need to be able to understand, if our children do not get help, okay, then they are at risk of dropping out. And so we have to be able to look at that transition rate, okay? If we look at the numbers in Belize City in terms of the crime that has been happening, there needs to be an arrest in terms of getting the child to be able to function properly. Also, what we look at is what the importance of the role of the school counselor, okay? Used properly, what the school counselor can help administration with is to use the data to make sound judgment. So it is more decision-driven information and judgments that are made. How many students are coming late? How many students are absent? How many students are at risk of failure? Okay? What are some of the issues that we're seeing in terms of depression, sexual abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, and various other ailments that are there, sickness that are there, so that we would be able to have a good grasp of what is happening. And so based on the information that you get, then you're able to put in programs of remediation. You could also have programs of prevention. Okay, bullying, for example, you could have a bullying prevention program if you see it as a problem. Okay, and so those are some of the things that you look at, and you have to be able to look at the importance of the school counselor within the setting. If you translate that to the secondary, it will be almost the same thing, only because it is at a different developmental stage. So you're looking at you're looking at teenagers, and teenagers have their own lifeline crisis that you have to be able to deal with. And so Christina, who works in that area, can also tell you some more about why.
Before you do though, I want to ask one of the questions in terms of, once upon a time, counselors were, when there were schools who were interested in counseling, they simply took the nicest teacher and made them the counselor. How has that changed now in terms of the qualifications necessary to be a school counselor in Belize?
Well, First of all, the association takes on the model that ASCA used, the American School Counseling Association. And in that model, there are 3 areas that we must address. There's the academic counseling, the career counseling, and the personal social development. So under academic counseling would come the things like kids who are coming in late, who are absent all the time. And so we had to focus our attention and our trainings or workshops into what do we look for, what encompasses academic counseling, what do you do under that, what do you do under career counseling, especially in secondary schools, where they take the general core for first and second, and then they begin to select if they want to do sciences, a technical subject. And so the school counselor, along with the teachers, assist students in pointing them in the directions that they want to go into, personality matching, certain career, the qualification. And then there's the personal social development, and this is where the life skills program have developed in most of the schools now, from primary to secondary, and even to tertiary at some extent. So we moved away from having the nicest teachers to getting people trained in these 3 areas. Now we are at a new level where we're now recognizing, and ASCA is also recognizing, that we need to go even further. We now need to tap into mental health. And so through the association, we try to get our people trained as much as possible in these areas.
How do you measure the effectiveness of these particular exercises? I ask simply because if I can recall my high school years, for instance, right? Each student was assigned a counselor. And this individual worked with you in several different areas, as you mentioned, perhaps academic, personal development, and career, what have you. I ask how effective is this simply because as a teenager, you're going through these changes, either becoming a young man or becoming a young woman, certain things you would be open to share, and other things you would repress, simply because that individual who is assigned to you, you may not be the most comfortable around, right? How does one, a counselor in this case, measure the progress being made by the student at the end of the academic year or that particular cycle?
Well, like Collin says, we work a lot with data. So the first thing we would look at is maybe what was our dropout rate last semester? By how much do we want to reduce that dropout rate? What are going to be some of the intervention programs? Will we be having tutorial programs? Will we be having a body system, study group? What is it that we will be doing to reduce that dropout rate or the lateness or whatever? So our effectiveness is measured mostly by data. For example, if you are working with a student who is at risk, maybe the student was at a D, and you begin working in the 4th week with the student. By the time you reach week 8, which is mid-semester, that D should have gone up to maybe a C plus. So by the end of the semester, that child or that student should be passing. It's difficult, it sounds beautiful on paper, but it is a lot of work. Because it's no longer teachers being assigned to groups of students, and there is now one counselor assigned to do just that. And the idea of counseling has grown a little bit more. Students are more willing to open up a little bit more. But you are right. Culturally, adolescents have this code of silence. And then in some ethnic groups, you should not tell what is happening at home. So it is challenging.
I remember at school, I had friends whose parents told them, don't go to a counselor because she will know all your family business. And it was different then. The training was different then. And that's why I asked the question about how qualified school counselors are now.
Let me just go there, because it is one of the exercises that we've been doing
Yeah.
in terms of Caryl is the secretary, and so what happens is that we have sat down, looked at the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, we look at how many persons we have with associates, how many persons have bachelors, how many persons have masters. Okay, because we need to know in terms of even furthering our educational development. If anybody comes to us in terms of where we need to grow, we need to be able to give them the data. So in terms of master's degree within the association, we have 10 persons who have a master's degree. Okay, we have about 15 who have bachelors in social work, and some of them have other degrees, right? Psychology. And then we'd have about 12 or 13 who have associate's degree. We also have one person who has a doctorate in education with a cognate in school counseling. So the numbers are very important for us, because when we go back and we look at external help or programs that might be developed, then we need to be able to tell them these are the numbers that we have, you know. And so again, it goes a little bit more farther than just the best teacher, you know.
Yeah.
So.
And to be very clear, it was well intentioned. It was attempting to help children in a way that it hadn't been done before. It was just that there were certain skills necessary and judgment calls that were necessary that they weren't equipped to be able to execute at that time. But I want to bring this to, we have 3 representatives here from tertiary level, secondary level, and primary school level. Now, I want to ask you, where do you feel that having a school counselor is most essential in a child's development?
I believe at the primary school level, because what we have seen is that as they move up, the problems, if they have issues that they're dealing with that are not dealt with correctly, just tend to grow. So as they go further up in their education, then the problem gets bigger and bigger and more compounded, and it manifests itself in different ways. So while in the primary school it might start off with fighting, at the high school level it might turn into more than just fighting. It may also turn into illegal drugs and activities. At the tertiary level it may become worse. Just before we came in here, Lupe was telling us about the fact that at the tertiary level she's seeing way more issues than she was at the high school level.
Wow. Because they were not attended to at an earlier age. But yet, we still have a bit of a deficiency at primary, well, we do have a deficiency at the primary school level. You function as an itinerant counselor.
Yes, I work with 6 schools, but most of my schools are rural schools. So the only government school in Belize City is Telemar School, and then I have to travel to Hatterville and Crooked Tree and the River Valley area and Lucky Strike.
What are some of the
Biscayne.
I mean, if you live in an urban community such as Belize City, your exposure to crime and violence at an early age is more pronounced, so to speak, than if you are in the River Valley area, for instance. What are some of the, without getting personal or anything, just a general overview, what are some of the issues that you find in dealing with some of these kids from the rural communities?
In the more rural communities, it's more family issues. And in the urban areas, it's more the violent behavior, and which is a result, I believe, of the trauma and the crime and violence that they're experiencing on a daily basis. But in the rural areas, most of the cases I've dealt with are either family issues or learning difficulties.
Collin, you mentioned earlier that we see cases of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, yes, because one of the things that you're looking at is you have students who have been in the gang-ridden area, whereby for years they have been experiencing it. Okay, and so what you have is that there are multiple instances of trauma. Okay, because the gun violence might be one, domestic violence might be another, okay?
Personal loss.
Grief and loss, okay? And so even in terms of that, some of the grieving that you have from children are traumatic grief, okay? And so these are, because when you look at the numbers again, Belize City for the past 10 years has had 80% of the murder for the country. It has been 80. So if you multiply 80 times 10, okay, it becomes 800. And then average male who has died is between 19 to 35. 19 to 35, they might have one child or they might have two child on average. And that is because we're not even talking about the stepchildren, okay, that they have impacted, okay? And what we're talking about is those who have died. We're not talking about those who have been shot and survive and incarcerated. Okay, so those are the numbers that we look at in terms of our children suffering.
What is the partnership that takes place? Because I don't want to give the impression that Belize City schools are Belize City primary schools are underserved, because the individual religious groups take on that responsibility. You said you work with government schools. Explain it to me, please.
Let me just go there so right now in Belize district, we have two counselors that are at the Methodist. Okay, we have two counselors that are at the Anglican. We have another counselor that is at the Presbyterian. We have one for the SDA, and then we have government, right? And so that is Belize City in terms of the Catholic has one. Okay, and those are the counselors for Belize City. There are various other programs by Restore Belize, and then there's also a program out of St. Martin's de Porres that also does counseling for the students, specifically for St. Martin's de Porres. So you also have CRD, the Community Rehab Department, that also provide counseling for children too. So we have the a networking there in terms of counselors that are there to be able to see what is happening within Belize City. If we go to through government, we also have a counselor that is in Belmopan, and then another one that is in San Ignacio, Santa Elena. Okay, and the government is also is sending on a yearly basis persons to be trained at Bridgewater State University so that the capacity can also be built.
Now, Christina, in terms of dealing with high schoolers at Pallotti, for instance, and some of the challenges that they face, you're dealing with kids who are coming from outside of Belize City, some from within crime-ridden areas of the city, some from broken homes, and what have you. What are some of the most prevalent issues that you as a counselor have had to deal with in terms of these young ladies?
I would say there are various issues, particularly in dealing with grief and loss, dealing with conflicts. Well, I work with a population with girls, so you know, self-esteem, because depending on whatever the situation is to cope and to build some form of resilience. I know you all ask at what age in a child's life. I think all aspects from preschool, you need a counselor. For some persons, there are certain areas that you could work on and you learn to cope, and there are other areas that something may trigger along throughout your life, and you'll need, you know, somebody to talk to who is confidential, who could help you throughout that time. And so if you notice, like Caryl spoke about being at the primary school, Lupe talked about being at the sixth form, where you're transitioning from an adolescent into a young person, and some people into adulthood, right? And so you're impacted in different ways, and like what you mentioned, you know, there are family issues, dealing with the loss, because when you lose someone, I mean, it, you know, and sometimes it compounds. If you if you lost someone when you were younger, something tragic happened, you deal with it, and then when you get older, you want to know, why are you so aggressive? Where is this aggression coming from? How comes you're angry and stuff like that? So there are various issues. But self-esteem is one of the big ones. the conflicts and the last, depending on whatever it is, violence or so.
So by the time they reaches tertiary level, some of the things that I've noticed in my first semester is depression, anxiety, phobia. You know, so the issue gets bigger if it were not addressed properly. And then the dynamics is different because I have two types of population. I have young people coming directly from high school, and then there's that transitional stage where they have a lot more freedom. The classes are scheduled differently, and you know, we have to teach them, what do you do with your free time? How do you time manage? Their little tantrum, their anger issues. And then I have the population with older people who are working or who were at home and now their children are grown and they're coming back. Their issues are different. Their issues has to do a lot with spousal relationship. Spouse getting jealous because mommy is going back to school now and mommy have to go do group work on Saturdays and you know.
Yeah,
So
breaking
it's
a
two
routine.
different population and their issues are different.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned to us off camera that this is in fact, you are the first counselor for the junior college. Or this is your first year as counselor for the junior college.
The junior college had a counselor way back, and unfortunately, he was murdered and he wasn't replaced. So it has been some time that the junior college, you know, they didn't have a counselor until this school year. The post opened up again, and I kind of transferred from a high school that I served for 13 years. And I went over to the junior college, but the need is there, and they recognize the need, and they've been waiting for a school counselor.
Yeah. And you said comparing to your 13 years in secondary, you're seeing very serious cases at tertiary level.
Right, right. In fact, talking about partnership in the district, it's different because we don't have Restore, Belize, and all of these agencies. So my partners would be human development, community rehab, the psychiatric nurse, just the community, liaison beat officers, and we support each other, the school counselors. So if there's a crisis in Mopan, we'll all go in. The counselor from Eden, from Heart, myself will go in. If there's a crisis at Sacred Heart, they will come in. So that's how we network in the district.
Yeah. You know, something happens as we get older and we seem to really forget what it's like. And I never thought it would happen to me when I was young. I said, I'll always remember. But we get older and we forget what it feels like to be anything under 18. And it is oftentimes a challenge of parents to see that their children need help. You know, perhaps it's a breakup in a high school and the child is not coping well. We put it in our 30, 40, 50 mind and say, oh, it's nothing. But for them, it's serious.
It is a loss.
Yeah.
It is a loss because what they knew as a home is no longer the same. So they worry. They worry if they're going to be okay. They worry what changes they're going to deal with. They worry what friends are going to say.
Yeah.
You know, especially because the communities are small. So if mommy and daddy breaks up, everybody's going to know that. So they have shame issues. You know, they feel
and we even have the sexualized photos and texts that also become a part of breakups as well, which somehow people don't want to accept is taking place in this country. I want to ask you, because you have insight directly into some of the challenges that our children are facing. What are the pressures that you see from this particular generation that you feel that maybe parents are choosing to ignore? Go ahead. We can have everybody give a little bit.
One of the things I think we need to clarify is that counseling is not for crazy people. I think that's one of the first things, and the stigma still exists. It has lessened, but it still exists. Counseling is helping somebody, a normal person, deal with issues that cause chaos in their lives. It's not necessarily that I'm crazy, I can't handle this. It's just something that throws you out of whack. It's not normal. It's something that maybe you haven't experienced before, so you need help getting through to help you to build the resources. So if something like this or the same thing happens again, then you know how to deal with it. So I think that's the first thing we need to recognize. in terms of dealing with the issues of today, I'm seeing some of them at the primary school level. And one of the things is that our parents aren't as up to date with technology as our kids are. So part of it, sometimes I don't think it's not that they're ignoring it. I think sometimes they really just don't know. They're not familiar with all these. I'm not even familiar with all of them in terms of Snapchat and all these different social media apps that exist. So if we're not taking a closer look at what our children are doing, what they're spending their time doing online and that sort of thing, then you may miss a lot of things.
Going to it too is that one of the things that you have to be able to understand that parenting is not by remote.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I have to be very blunt with
Yeah.
it.
It's very hands-on and cooperative.
And so if you have your child your child is leaving very early in the morning, okay, and you're coming back, you're not seeing your child until around 6 in the evening, okay, then it becomes problematic, because what happens then is the child is yearning for attention, and the child will seek that attention through whatever means. Attention for the child is not good attention or bad attention. For the child, it is attention.
Any attention.
Any attention. We also have to be able to look at in terms of the parenting styles, because there are some people who have different parenting styles, okay? I might have one parenting style, my wife might have a different parenting style. There might be problems in terms of communication within the relationship of the adults, and then the child becomes the scapegoat for the existing problems that are within the relationship. So even those things we need to be able to understand. At what level are the parents working out their issues that they would be able to give their child, okay? And in terms of co-parenting, because as Caryl had talked about, whereby you have the breakup, are we emotionally using our children to get back at our partners? And we don't look at what is happening, you know? Is it whereby our children are getting too much information about our partners at a very early age? Because one of the things that we also have to be able to understand, you're the parent, you're not the friend. And so there are boundaries in terms of what you give your child, what you tell your child, how much time you give your child, okay, what level of attention you're giving. And so these things are very important in terms of the issues that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I think supervision and monitoring from parents is important. It's more challenging because parents are working, and like Collin says, children are left for very long hours. But there must be some system in place where they're monitored, what they're looking at on the internet, how long they spend on the internet. So whenever I do parenting program, I always advise my parents, have them work on the laptop outside on the dining room table, for example. So when you're in the kitchen kneading your tortillas or whatever you're doing, you can take a little peek to see, is it homework they're doing? What is it they're looking at?
Yeah.
You know, I discourage students taking the laptop into their bedroom and locking the door, because you don't know what they're doing. But as they grow older, you need to trust a little bit more and give a little bit more freedom. So if the person is older, maybe going to UB doing a bachelor's degree, I mean, you won't treat that person like a kid having him or her sit at the table.
You're not supervising.
But maybe now and again you go and tap on the room door and check, are you okay? What are you doing? You know, kids need to know that they will be checked on. They need to know that.
I have a,
And from the
sorry.
secondary, yeah.
Well, including with what they've said, I think for me, communication, talking to your kids, telling them your expectation, checking in with them, how was your day, telling them that you love them, those are very important. And like what she explained, the monitoring, right? Because once you speak to your child from a very young age, you build that bond, there's that communication, they know what the rules are, what your expectations are, what are some rewards, stuff like those. Back to when you spoke about relationship, that's a big thing, even friendship for a teenager, right? And it's learning how to deal with conflict. It's learning how to manage conflict, and that you'll always have conflict in relationship, and how to move on and how to cope. So that's very important to, because even when you look at the violence, it has to do with conflicts, right? So it's learning those different life skills to help you along.
I'd like to just bring it back to the association and the purpose of the association. The numbers that Collin mentioned in terms of credentials should have added to about 4 to 5. That is not all the counselors that we have in Belize, and that's one of the things that we're trying to work on this year. We're not saying that everybody has to be a member. It's optional. You choose whether or not you want to be a member of the association. But what we're trying to do is to get everybody involved, even if you're not officially a member, but you're on our mailing list so that you can attend trainings. Because he mentioned earlier that we officially became an organization in 2012, but the work actually began way before that. There was a previous organization that we got resources from, counselors came from, and that was what gave us what we needed to start this association. So the work for this association began about 2009. And that is also when we began collaborating with the ministry to provide continuous professional development through the summer. So we had about 70-something applications to be members of the association. But at first we were only taking in applications. Now that we're realizing the importance of the data, we're going back. We need credentials. We need to know exactly where everybody is, what level they're on, where they're working. And this year we also introduced a data collection instrument that we're asking our members to fill out so that we can look at the numbers in terms of how many referrals do you receive in your school? What are the reasons for those referrals? How many teaching hours do you have? Because at the high school level, they're teaching life skills, but we also have counselors who are teaching other subjects apart from life skills. So all of those things, we're trying to organize the counselors nationwide, no matter the denomination, no matter the level, because we also have members from the IT vets. We have the tertiary levels, primary level, secondary level, because what we're trying to do is to lobby more with the ministry in terms of we need to not be itinerant teachers with counseling responsibilities anymore. We need to be counselors. We need to have a defined role.
You need to have a presence in the school so the kids know and trust you. But I have one final question in looking at your relationship with teachers, because sometimes you meet a child that may have behavioral issues, but the entire school, the entire administration has already said, oh, that's the bad one. Or he come from this neighborhood, that's what he's going to be. How do you work with teachers? What is it like trying to convert teachers into more, I don't know the right words, but having them understand the situation as well?
First of all, teachers are our #1 partners. Because they're the one that are in the classroom, and they're the one that sees the sign and symptoms before they're referred to us. So we have what you call in-house trainings, where school counselors are given a day or two to work with their teachers, and this is where we try to sensitize them, we try to educate them, we try to help them understand the importance of the partnership and why they shouldn't just dismiss something and make a referral. I keep telling my teachers, you don't need to investigate and find out if there is a problem indeed. The minute you begin to feel uncomfortable or a little light bulb go in your head, you send that to the school counselor. She or he will be the one to determine if indeed this is a case or if it was just something out of the blues. So at least for me, that's what I do with my teachers. I keep telling, and I train every single person on my staff. I train my janitors, the security, everybody. And I find that the security is very important. They're the one that checking students in the gate. And they would send kids to me, Miss, it's a hot day and so is in a sweater. Or Miss so-and-so have cuts. You know, I go to the bathroom lady says, Miss, there's a young lady in there, she's taking really long, I think she's doing something in there. She came out staggering, things like that, you know. So I train everybody, even the cafeteria person. Who are the kids that are eating and who are the kids not eating? So it's not only about partnership with the teachers, but the entire staff.
I have one final question, and it goes back to what was mentioned earlier in respect of mental health being able to counsel and be able to identify mental health issues amongst the populations in question here. Is it that we're seeing more and more kids and teenagers dealing with issues of depression
I
or
would
anxiety?
say yes. For me in the West, I would say yes. And so my partnership with the psychiatric nurse and the San Ignacio Polyclinic and the police is very important.
But trauma also comes under mental health because,
Right.
as she mentioned earlier, the areas that school counselors are really trained in has to do with academic, personal, social, in terms of social skills and personal development in terms of self-esteem and career development. So when we're delving into trauma and all of these other areas, those come under mental health.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we're necessarily trained for. Some of us are, because some of us have degrees in mental health counseling or in psychology, but all of us are not. So it's a thing where we're trying to train our members that even if you can't deal with certain issues because they're beyond your training, you're able to identify that this is a more mental health issue so that we can get the necessary help that that person needs.
Or we train people in crisis intervention,
Yeah.
you know, just to support that child and the family until we could refer the individual to the rightful resources
Or until they
and
get that
people,
help, because
right.
sometimes we make the referrals and it's a while before that help actually comes for them. So
And hence also the reason why we're also doing the collecting data. You know, we have the data instrument so that the counselors as such, you just won't see it in Guadalupe working here, Christina, Collin, Caryl, but you would see it as a whole, so that information that we get in terms of what we're seeing can be recorded, and then we can also use it within the Ministry of Education statistics and also in terms of the Ministry of Health statistics.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what happens is that with those information, we can start to see what are some of the skills and what are some of the necessary areas in terms of mental health for the country.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing it,
Yeah.
we're documenting it, and we're making sure
So
that
it won't go solely by anecdotal
Yeah.
information
Yeah.
anymore. Well, it sounds like this particular association has quite a lot that you are working on, and we want to say thank you for coming in and sharing a bit of the work that you have been doing. I've been told that you are doing education this week,
Yes.
and a little downtime at the end of the week for counselors to socialize, which I'm sure you need as well. Don't talk work, right? But thank you for being here.
Thank you very
having
much.
us. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of the Belize Cancer Society and the Ministry of Health. So stay tuned.